All right. Hello, everybody. This is what happens after the Jets' biggest win of the year. And this is what happens when Ken Wiebe can't sleep. He just calls me up and says, let's go live out there. Let's do a pregame show. Let's answer people's questions. And that's what we're here to do, everybody. If you're interested in talking and you want to join the conversation, just leave your comments wherever you're watching this. They'll pop right up into the show and we'll be able to bring them right up onto the show, show them on the screen here. But let's start out, Kenny, with your take on tonight's absolutely huge victory. I think it's the biggest win of the year for the Jets. What are some of your takeaways from tonight's game?
Yeah, for sure, Sean. I mean, obviously, we've talked all year long about the Jets' ability to rebound and pick themselves off the mat. No bigger opportunity to do so than tonight after getting shelled by the Montreal Canadiens. I mean, there were certainly some moments where the Jets were a little bit wobbly, I think, and they had to lean on their number one netminder. But we saw it in Connor Hellebuck's eyes after he was pulled on Saturday night. We heard Mason Appleton say the Jets knew exactly what they were going to get from Connor Hellebuck, and that's what they got. They got a brilliant and elite level goaltending performance. To me, it does not matter one bit that Hellebuck allowed 3 goals. He was sensational, and I think Mitch Marner is going to be having nightmares tonight, Sean,
Yeah.
based on a couple of those saves that Hellebuck made, especially that one right pad save from the
Yeah,
slot.
low to high, phenomenal save.
Unbelievable save. I mean, Hellebuck was excellent. And again, the Jets had a lot of strong performances, even though, again, we know that the Leafs made a big push. But again, we knew that this was, no matter what the Jets said about it, this was absolutely a measuring stick game for them, Sean. And hey, in the area where it mattered most, they measured up. I mean, again, the analytics will not be as kind to the Jets, but they found a way to get it done, and I was certainly impressed by the way that they came back, especially knowing the Leafs were going to be hungry after losing consecutive games for the first time this year themselves.
Well, they call them apples, but it's been the goals that have been getting Mason Appleton some recognition with the game winner here tonight. Your take on him and where he's taken this season and the potency that he's added to that third line.
Mason Appleton's been just fantastic, Sean. I mean, we were talking about him from day one of training camp. I thought he was going to be the best fit to play on that third line with Adam Lowry and Andrew Kopp. And although Matthew Perreault started in that role, I mean, he did get injured early in the sessions there. And Appleton has just been absolutely dynamite. We saw it the other night after Paul Maurice talked about the need to play a more direct game. There was Mason Appleton driving the net and jamming home a rebound goal against the Vancouver Canucks. And tonight, when the going got tough, Neil Pionk quick to intercept a pass in the neutral zone, and then an impressive backhand sauce pass from Andrew Kopp, and then just an absolutely brilliant backhand to forehand drive by Mason Appleton. His speed is just really exceptional right now. He's become an elite penalty killer, and man, oh man, I've said it for a couple of years now, Sean. I thought that Mason Appleton had the ability to not only replace Brandon Tanev, but to have a little bit more offensive upside. And again, I think there's also that physical element of Appleton's game that he's really been able to add as well. And now that he's added the finish, I mean, this is a guy that can be a double-digit goal scorer. I mean, you don't want to put a ceiling on the guy, but I could see him being a consistent 15-plus goal scorer with his combination of hands and wheels. And man, what an effort! And when the Jets needed it most, I mean, in the game that we figured would be dominated by the high-end stars, you have a checking line forward with some pretty good hands on him that comes through with probably the most important most important goal of the game for the Jets.
We see you all out there watching. We'd love to speak with you. Got some questions coming in here. Mark Totes asks, and before we get to your third takeaway, Kenny, we want to serve the audience here. So Mark Totes asks, Dubois' game tonight, your impression?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was. I'm not really. I don't have a big impression. I don't think he really stood out off the page. Didn't jump out off the page for me. Um, I would you say you expected more? Maybe. I mean, again, I think this is a guy who's still getting comfortable. Obviously, that line came up with a really important goal of their own with just
Mm-hmm.
absolutely brilliant patience from Nikolai Ehlers setting up in his office behind the net. And I mean, what a pass and what a finish. I mean, we talked about Kyle Connor on the pregame show. Just an absolutely brilliant one-timer there. Dubois was out on the ice. I thought it was interesting to see Paul Maurice showing the confidence in Pierre-Luc Dubois to be out there to protect the lead. He went out instead of Mason Appleton. I wondered, Mason Appleton blocked a shot on that previous shift. I wonder if he was injured at all on the play. But again, generally when a player is injured, he doesn't come out to speak with the media afterwards. So must have just been an example of, I mean, I think that Maurice wanted all three centermen out on the ice there with Copp, Lowry, and Dubois. Again, I don't think it was a poor game for Dubois, but again, I think that we probably built it up a little bit too much with all the discussion from this morning. And I think that a lot of us maybe expected Pierre-Luc Dubois to be channeling his bubble hockey experience against the Toronto Maple Leafs. But having said that, even though he didn't necessarily end up on the score sheet, I think he still had an important game. And his ability to play hard minutes against Tavares and Matthews still very important, even though he maybe didn't have as dominant a game on the score sheet element. And Mark, what did you think of his game?
I think for me, it makes sense that at the beginning of the day when we were talking about him and everyone was bringing up what had happened, I remember I thought it was strange that Chevy, when he acquired Dubois, had spoken about that series that he had against the Toronto Maple Leafs. It just seemed to really put him on the spot. And so I wasn't surprised to a degree that when we tried to push that narrative, and I don't want to say we tried to push a narrative. I mean, it happened. He had a really good series against Toronto. We wanted to know what acquiring him was going to mean against a team like Toronto, who could very well be the 1 and 2. And we'll get to talking about that here. But Paul Maurice really tempered expectations this morning and really kind of poured cold water on the whole idea of Dubois being this guy that they got to go in and shut down Austin Matthews. And you could see a lot of tonight's matchup was Mark Scheifele against Austin Matthews. So it makes tons of sense to me at this stage why Paul Maurice approached that the way he did. You don't want to put too much on Dubois, and it's clear that Maurice has taken a soft touch in bringing him in. The first couple of games kind of spun his wheels a little bit, so he puts him with some guys with Blake Wheeler and Mark Scheifele to kind of get him going, get him moving. Now that he's moved him onto that line, I think he's sheltering that line a little bit and bringing them along slowly. It makes sense to me why he responded the way they did. One guy, though, who broke out tonight, who you wanted to talk about, is Josh Morrissey, who had his first goal of the year.
Yeah, and you could see the look in his face, Sean, the way he looked to the sky. It was as if a massive weight was lifted from him. We know that there were opportunities for Josh. And I think one of his best opportunities of the entire season was on a power play against the Toronto Maple Leafs in that second game of the year, where he rattled a slap shot off the mask of Freddie Anderson. So obviously he got a bit of a break with that going off the skate of Austin Matthews. But we know there's been a lot of pressure on Josh Morrissey this season. He has taken on a large role on the top pairing for the Jets. We know that Neil Pionk has been absolutely dynamite on that pairing on that shutdown pairing with Derek Forbort this year. But I really thought you saw Josh play an intense but a little bit more relaxed game. I think you saw he was very assertive in the game, very good defensively, and I think it was just a steady and calm presence. I mean, that's the Josh Morrissey that we saw, I think, when he was starring on that pairing with Jacob Trouba on that shutdown pairing. 29 minutes of play. Obviously, the Jets were down to 5 defensemen after Nathan Beaulieu left the game with that what appeared to be left hand injury after blocking that shot. Again, we're not doctors, Sean, but we also do know, when we can't ignore the fact that Nathan Beaulieu suffered a number of broken bones last year, and one of them was definitely to his hand from blocking a shot. So Paul Maurice telling us after the game that he won't have a better update until tomorrow. But I mean, man, it'll be very interesting to see. If he's out of the lineup, do the Jets go back to Logan Stanley, or do you go to Sami Nico? I think that'll be an interesting decision coming up for the Jets. We know that Stanley was very good early, and we know that Nico did a nice job with his puck moving ability when he came into the lineup recently as well. So there's an answer from Mark right there. He did like his game out there. Doesn't like him with Ehlers. See, Mark, I disagree. I actually think that it's going to be a really good combination there. I think I really liked the play from Nikolai Ehlers that he made, I believe, in the first period, where he cut to the middle and really got a good shot off. I think that those two can be really good for one another, but let's see how it goes here. Again, this was only the 10th game of the year, I believe, for Pierre-Luc Dubois, and only, I think, the 8th since he's been back to health. So I think it's going to take a little bit more time to figure out who he best gels with, and then we'll see from there.
Did you want to take this one from Craig Zamzow? I mean, I think the idea was to keep these things to 10 minutes, but why does it matter? We're here. You know, if anyone has any questions, keep them firing. We'll go until there's no more questions. Craig Zamzow asking, similar to the previous question, who's next man up on defense? Do you expect Niku to draw in here, or do they use this as an excuse to get Stanley up and get him back into the lineup? If given we don't know what's going to happen until tomorrow, but if there's that hole, if Beaulieu is out for a time.
Yeah, I think if Beaulieu has to go on IR, I think it would open up the door for Logan Stanley. But again, for a coach, I think you would be tempted to play the player who was most recently in the lineup, and that was Sami Niku. So, I mean, we'll see what happens there. I mean, I don't have a good feel for it today, and we don't want to go too far down the road before we even know if Nathan Beaulieu is going to be out at all. So. Let's take it from there. My initial guess would be Niku, but I mean we also know that Logan Stanley jumped into the lineup in his first NHL game against Toronto and handled himself pretty well against that skill and speed. So we also know that the Jets are capable of going, cutting down to 5 defensemen if they have to. But again, we would caution against that, Sean, because we know how taxing. I believe it's a 22-game and 40-day stretch for the Jets, 17 this month alone. And they're in a stretch of 12 of 14 on the road. So I would think that the Jets are going to be extremely cautious when it comes to the injury itself. But let's see how it goes.
Abbott Fred asking about this. I got a lot of texts about this, also about Nathan Beaulieu's play on that, but and we have not addressed this yet. But Connor's glide by or stick check on the first Leafs goal. Do you see it as him maybe not being as committed to the play as he should be, or do you see him maybe a player being caught in a spot he may not have expected himself to be in based on the decision that Nathan Beaulieu decided to make in that moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question, and I got a lot of responses on the Twitter mentions today as well when it came to that. I really don't think that Kyle Connor, could he have played it a little bit harder on the back check? Sure, and there was a component to that as well, but I don't think that Connor anticipated Nathan Beaulieu anticipating the puck going. To me, this is what happened. Nathan Beaulieu made a bad read. He thought the puck was going to the wall. He anticipated the puck going to the wall, and once he stepped up and made the hit to the player on the wall, that being able to vacate that area allowed a free and open lane. Again, we don't ever know what's going through their heads, but things happen really quickly. I know it's easy to criticize a play in slow motion, but I don't think that Nathan Beaulieu makes that play unless he thinks he has backside support from Dylan DeMello, but DeMello had his man. So, I mean, unless Beaulieu knows that Kyle Connor was in a chase position, so I don't think that Beaulieu can assume that he was going to make up the ground on Zach Hyman. I think that was just one of those reads that kind of went awry, and Zach Hyman had a good burst of speed and put the puck in the net. Here, let me bring in the question. How aggressive do you think the Jets should be in trying to acquire a top 4 defenseman? I mean, you wrote about Matthias Ekholm, which was referenced by Elliot Friedman in his 31 Thoughts. Elliot Friedman, who we will be having on our 9 a.m. Friday morning weekly podcast this upcoming week. You should check in. Anyone who's here watching, it would be a good idea for you to go over and subscribe to our Kenny and Rennie Show's YouTube page, where a lot of this stuff lives. But you've touched on this, and I think we're both of the belief that the Jets, contenders, and if there's a spot they need to shore up, that's it. How pressing is the matter, Ken? Yeah, I mean, I think it's always tough to say how general managers are going to respond. I mean, because we're in a shortened season, because we're in a year where not a lot of teams are not only are they not bringing in a lot of revenue, they're losing a lot of money. We know the Jets are right up. They're over the cap. They're into LTIR. How much extra money do you want to spend? But I do think because of the scenario and the fact that the team coming out of the North Division, Sean, will be in the Final Four. I mean, it might be their best opportunity to win the Stanley Cup and to become the first team Canadian team since '93 to actually be in, have an opportunity to raise that trophy. But again, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. I think this is an important series. I don't think that Kevin Cheveldayoff goes into this series thinking that it's the determining factor in whether or not he's going to acquire a top four defenseman. But I mean, hey, if the Jets win 2 out of 3, or if the Jets somehow found a way to sweep the series, would that make you more tempted to go out and get a top four defenseman? Man, I mean, you'd certainly think that it was a possibility. And on the flip side, if the Jets had gotten shellacked the way the Edmonton Oilers did in that 13-1 composite score in their first place showdown last week, I mean, would that deter you from going out and making a move? Man, you'd certainly think twice about it. That's the thing. I mean, we're approaching the midway point. The Jets know that they've got a lot of high-end skilled forwards. We know they have elite level goaltending, and we know they have more of a workman-like blue line. I do think they're going to go out and make a trade. I think they're going to, especially a guy like Ekholm, to me makes so much sense, Sean, because of all the things we've talked about and what I wrote. Because he has that extra year. Yes, it would create some additional complications when it comes to the Seattle expansion draft.
Yeah.
But Matthias Ekholm can play all kinds of style. He can be a full-on shutdown defenseman. He could be a guy who could slide onto a top pairing. You move Josh Morrissey over to the right, sure, he might not have looked quite as comfortable there earlier in the year, but I think if you're playing with someone like Matthias Ekholm, who has so much experience, has played in a Stanley Cup final, has played in Game 7s, including that one against the Jets in 2018, has a lot of playoff experience. I think he's a guy that can give you second power play minutes if you needed him to. I don't think the Jets would need him to necessarily, but he's a good puck mover. He's big and strong. He clears the front of the net. I mean, he's the type of guy that any contender will be looking at going after. But how many of those contenders want to give up the assets required to get him, and then B, would not be in a similar situation where they can actually protect him? I mean, that's the biggest question mark. We've heard about Philadelphia being in the running, Boston being in the running. Let's not kid ourselves. Matthias Ekholm would help any team. What's the price? What's the cost of acquisition? And what are you willing to give? I mean, I think it's for surely going to take a first-round pick and probably a prospect. And I think if you're Nashville, if the reason why you're moving Ekholm in the first place is because you already have 3 defensemen you want to protect in Roman Josi, Ryan Ellis, and probably Dante Fabro, you probably want a futures element that you don't have to protect, like a Christian Vesalainen. So,
yes.
I mean, again, David Poile is going to ask for as much as he can. He's going to ask for the moon. We've been hearing that it's probably a seller or a buyer's market, but all you need is a couple of teams to be bidding for the same person to turn it into a seller's market. So who's going to blink first? And then the other part of that too, Sean, with the quarantine the way it is, I mean, the Jets have already gone through this with Pierre-Luc Dubois. If they're going to go out and get a player like Matthias Ekholm, I think they would do it sooner than later. I don't think you wait right up until the trade deadline, because you won't have them for enough time. And another interesting name, I mean, we've talked about it on our Instagram lives as well, David Savard. Maybe not quite as, flashy is not the right word, but Savard is a very good defensive player. And again, the thing with Savard is there's an element of attachment. I mean, Pierre-Luc Dubois lived with David Savard and his family for one of his seasons in Columbus, so there would be a comfort level. And when it comes to Ekholm, the Jets they wouldn't need to scout him. They already know what he would bring to the table.
Oh, yeah.
They played so many games against him, and I do think they're going to go out and make a bid to improve that top 4. It's just a matter of what the cost is and what it's going to take to get a deal like that done.
I mean, the thing about Savard is he's cheaper to acquire because he's a UFA at the end of the season, right? So just by that nature, he's not going to cost as much, which I think we know puts him makes that a good idea for Chevy. I was texting with someone earlier on, and I'd said when it comes to this whole preparation for the expansion draft, I feel like Chevy is most definitely playing chess while maybe some other teams are playing checkers. He's really thought this through. For a team that's as deep as they are, the players that they look to be potentially losing in this situation I mean, you would expect to lose a greater name based on the depth that this team has. But how much of a deterrent do you think that is? Because if you go out and you get Matthias Ekholm, not only are you paying more to get him, but it probably means that you've lost Dylan DeMello, does it not? Unless you're going to swing a deal to try and keep a guy around.
Well, that's the other part of the equation, Sean. I mean, we've just talked about Mason Appleton earlier. I mean, the way that Appleton's playing, the Jets have got to try to find a way to keep him protected as well. But that complicates things when it comes to the potential an extension for Adam Lowry, or keeping Paul Stastny for an additional year. I mean, maybe you can wait until after free agency for Stastny, but um, I wouldn't even say that would. I mean, who knows? I mean, the only difference there is that Stastny's 35 years old, so but he's still going to attract interest from contenders. So,
Hmm.
and Adam Lowry, if he gets to free agency, there's certainly no guarantee the Jets would be able to win the bid to keep him. I mean, just look around the North Division. You don't think the
Oh,
Edmonton Oilers would want
yeah.
Adam Lowry as their third line center behind
We've
Draisaitl and McDavid? I mean,
we've gone through this exercise before. There's not a team that he doesn't improve in the North Division. And some teams, to your point, I always look at the Edmonton Oilers and think, what does that team need? They need a guy who, when McDavid and Draisaitl are not on the ice, makes them harder to play against. And that's, crack open the can. That's exactly what Adam Lowry does. We got some questions piling up in the queue here, Ken. So let's hit these and let's get through them as quick as we can to make sure that we're addressing everybody. Dusty Wall Gaming says, with the lack of shots in comparison to the opponent, again, is that more of the style of play and looking for higher quality chances as opposed to just putting a number of pucks on net? I didn't see the Jets being overly selective tonight. I think they made the best of the chances they had.
yeah, I mean, again, the Jets are not going to be Montreal. They're not going to be firing shots from all over the rink. I think today it was a matter of, I mean, some of it was score effects. I think obviously once they took that 4-2 lead, we know that Toronto came pretty hard and had a ton of chances from that home plate area and made life awfully difficult on Connor McDavid. I don't think the Jets necessarily sat back. I just think that this was a great eye opener for people who have not been watching the Toronto Maple Leafs, and we know that they are full value in being that first place team in the North. They have a potent team, they have a deep team, and man, I liked a lot of what I saw from, I mean, their third line. I mean, they're an impressive group out there, and they generate a lot. And again, it's going to be a high-flying game at times. I mean, it's funny. I mean, the game went from being pretty defensive to being pretty high-scoring in a short period of time. And again, if it were not for the play of Connor Hellebuyck, the Jets could have easily lost that game. So again, I think that they played well and they did generate a fair amount. Can they generate more? Of course, but I mean, we've seen this so much. There's often going to be a push from the other team. We saw it from Montreal, we saw it from Vancouver, we've seen it from Calgary. Let's not forget the desperation element. I mean, the Leafs were not desperate in the way that Montreal was or in the way that Vancouver was. Vancouver's trying to keep their season alive, but the Leafs had lost consecutive games for the first time this year. They're a darn good hockey club, and they made a significant push. I mean, I think that the Jets had a couple chances to push back, and I mean, there was the one opportunity where they nearly got the empty net goal. I mean, that's the thing, when you pull your goalie with just under 4 minutes to go, there's a risk element, and when the Jets were unable to connect on that empty net goal, then they gave up a goal that allowed Toronto to get within one, and they had a ton of chances to even the score. So it'll be interesting. I mean, again, can you win 2 in a row against the Leafs? I mean, all of a sudden, that's another test. We talked about the litmus test, the measuring stick, whatever you want to call it. I mean, this series is far from over. The Jets got the early leg up, but and again, full value to them for their ability to respond to a subpar and unacceptable effort. But again, they were able to shower it off. And look at what Josh Morrissey said about the calmness that Paul Maurice instilled in the game after what was the worst loss of the season for them.
Yeah.
There was no panic. There was no. And again, Blake Wheeler called it an outlier. And then what did the Jets do? They went out and backed that up with a strong performance.
To the point you were making, I think what we saw from the Toronto Maple Leafs is what we've seen from the Winnipeg Jets this year, and that they have that capability to take a slow grinding game and turn it around and make that push the way that we've seen the Winnipeg Jets do so. Eric Hildebrand says, love the post-game coverage. Thanks. How about a happy honker award or a player of the game from each of you after the Jets wins? Let's do that. I got to go with Connor Hellebuyck. I don't even think I need to explain why. We got to move through these here, Kenny. So who's your guy?
Yeah, I would say it's Hellebuyck for sure. I mean, honorable mention to Mason Appleton for his ability to supply the GWG, and again, the second, the third star or the second star would probably be Morrissey, and then maybe I guess you'd be the third star was maybe Appleton.
I liked Andrew Kopp in the
Cobb
he
was
gets the
great today
goal
too.
and
Yeah,
he
he was
sets
great.
up Appleton. I think it was on display, quietly on display, the things that he can give you in that depth element that he
And
provides.
so important for Kopp because we know he had the great start to the year and then some dry spells. So super important for Andrew Kopp to get going because he's a guy that is driven by confidence. He can do a lot of good things even when he doesn't show up on the score sheet. But Kopp's a guy that has given so much of that contribution on that secondary scoring element. So important. Similarly to how Matthew Perreault has done the job. Really important for Kopp to get involved there. And Perreault didn't get a point, but incredible screen on that Kopp tip.
Yeah, well, I'll say this: the Kopp had been somewhat quiet offensively as of late, but like Matthew Pro, it sure seems when those two show up, they show up at precisely the right time. Dandu 65, the fourth line's been playing some very solid hockey. Are we going to see Harkins or Vesalainen? Essentially, Ken, or are we in a position where it's going to take an injury for these guys to see the ice?
Well, it looks like it. Again, we've talked about this a lot. I think that there's an opportunity with the 17 games this month that we're going to see Harkins. I think there was an update with Christian Vesalainen being reassigned to the Moose, but he hasn't played yet. So I think that Vesalainen is dealing with an injury. I don't know how serious the injury is, but I would also include David Gustafsson. I think he had an outstanding showing again last night from some of the clips that I saw in that game against the Stockton Heat. David Gustafsson's a guy that I wouldn't write him off. I think we might see him before the year is over as well. But see what happens. I mean, the Jets, we know they're happy with that veteran fourth line. Let's see how things transpire as we move along here.
Craig Zamzow says, would you send the top line out when trying to hold a 1-goal lead in the last minute? Surprised they see as much ice in these spots. Surprised. This is the top line that, well, I forget what the stat was, but of the players in the league who lead the league in points with an empty net. It's 3 of the top 5 were Mark Scheifele, Blake Wheeler, and Kyle Connor. These guys get given every possible opportunity to close games out and usually do fairly well at it by outscoring the opponent. Now, have we seen times where they've looked that they've been exposed time and again, but chances are that line is more likely to score, in my mind, than they are to get scored against.
Yeah, absolutely, Sean. For me, this is easy. The coach needs to trust you in order to put you on the ice. Yes, and there's an element of you try to get your top guys a few cookies with the empty net, but never at the cost of potentially giving up the tying goal. I mean, I'd like to see the stat until I see the stat that shows those guys are on the ice for more than, if I think Wheeler has 22 points. If you can show me a stat that those guys have given up more than 20 goals or anywhere near double-digit goals in those empty net scenarios and 6-on-5 situations, then we can have a conversation. Craig, this is very easy for me. The Jets play that line against the top line all the time, so it's not a surprise that they would get time in that situation as well. Paul Stastny obviously is a guy who the Jets used with those two guys in 2018 after he came over. He would often replace Kyle Connor in empty net scenarios. And the other thing today, I mean, the Lowry line went out first when the goalie was pulled. It wasn't the Scheifele line that went out right away. And you're always going to go through at least 2 rotations, so if not 3. So, I mean, that's something to consider as well. And, after that, Craig, there's John. I don't think that, I mean, again, we're not in the rink, so usually I don't think that Blake Wheeler had an open shot.
Yeah, I was gonna say
I don't think
Toronto did a really, really good job of shutting down any shots at that open net, and I think that showed. They pressured them, and they pressured them in a way that if you were going to hit that net, you were almost going to have to put it through the player, which carries risk. And as a coach, I'd rather have my player make sure they get it down the ice than try and shoot for the open net for a player that's blocking that lane and risk having it gloved or down or knocked down and put the pressure back on you. Last one. Did we not have a question very similar to this in our pregame on the Insta? Yep. The Jets are a deep team. Do you ever see them moving to a more aggressive, albeit more tiring PK? I think they've got a fairly aggressive PK. That's what I've now aggressive in the way that they're trying to turn the puck over and head up ice and score. I don't know about that. I think there's been a couple times that I've seen Andrew Kopp and Lowry kind of push the puck out, and I've thought, okay, if they run, they could maybe get a potential scoring chance here. But then when I see them turn and go to the bench, it makes me think of what we've heard Paul Morrissey say a number of times over the last couple of weeks. Sometimes as you mature, you have the confidence not to make the play. And I think that those two really fit that mold when it comes to the penalty kill.
Yeah, and there's only certain points where, again, pressure is nice to have and it's important, but we've also seen this with the Ottawa Senators penalty kill, which is incredibly aggressive when it works, and when you can force the other team to fumble or to mishandle the puck, it looks great. But it's often that the offensive team with the man advantage, if you move the puck crisply against a team that's overly aggressive, you often find yourself with a backdoor tap in. So there's always that risk reward element when it comes to the PK. I think that the Jets are doing a better job. I mean, there's still always room for improvement, but I mean, their numbers are, impacted by a really slow start to the year. But I mean, that's an area where I think they've gotten better at. And I think that since Mason Appleton has taken his place in that penalty kill, I think they've gotten even better. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, again, the Leafs are operating at over 30% on the power play. So it may sound silly, but limiting them to one power play goal is a successful night in a lot of occasions when you consider what the Leafs have been able to do with that man advantage this season.
All right, we're through the questions. I'm going to run through the three things that stood out to me. First off, we were heading into this game and we were talking about the high-end matchups, the Scheifele's versus the Matthews. I have had online arguments with some people from Sportsnet about who is Canada's deepest team. I thought the Winnipeg Jets took a big step forward in showing that here tonight against this Toronto Maple Leafs team. I mean, yeah, Austin Matthews had a great game, and Hyman, who's been on a roll, he continues to roll. Those guys look very dangerous. As you touched on, Marner looked really dangerous and is probably shaking his head and may have nightmares about some of the opportunities that he didn't get on. But to me, it's the depth. It's from goaltending to the way that the defense played tonight, and to Mason Appleton getting the game winner, to Andrew Kopp having 2 points, to Neil Pionk putting up 3 points, I believe it was tonight. I thought that the depth won that game for the Winnipeg Jets. One thing I keep thinking about this is we talked about it in our last internet show when we had Chris Johnston on, and he talked about how this Toronto team has been through this before, the contender coming up and challenging them for top spot in the league. Montreal did it earlier in the season. They sent Montreal on their way. Edmonton went in recently for a 3-game series, and they most definitely sent Edmonton on their way. Didn't look like they gave them a look. I'll say this, Chris Johnston had said he believes we've arrived on the true number 1 and 2 in this division, and I think Winnipeg showed that tonight. I mean, yeah, they allowed a lot of shots. Yeah, maybe they, to a degree, got away with some potential goals there. Hellebuck playing the way that he did, but I think they clearly showed that they're able to give Toronto a run for their money like no other team in the North Division has been able to do so far. And finally, I just want to touch on, I touched on it about some of the different elements, the depth, the goaltending. The one thing that I find is very interesting about this Jets team, Paul Maurice touched on it, that second game they played against Montreal, where Montreal racked up all those shots, but they end up beating Montreal in overtime. And Paul Maurice had said the only way you win a game like that is your goaltender has to show off the way that he did there, and you have to have a skilled guy like, I believe it was Nick Ehlers, who pulls out a real skilled play to win that game there. This is what we saw again here tonight. The Winnipeg Jets finding a way to do it and getting just enough elements of their game going at the right time to be able to pull out a tight win against a really good team. They needed goaltending tonight. They got that. Their top guys were getting outplayed or at least outscored by the other team's top guys. So the depth guys need to show up and do it. And the defense need to stand up in a way that is going to, I thought they really pressured Toronto and kept them looking human, not the powerhouse that they had looked for like so often this season. They kept them looking human until towards the end of that third period. All in all, the right pieces showed up at the right time to get a victory, and I think that has been a very, very common theme so far this season.
Yeah, and let's spend a little bit more time on Neil Pionk. I mean, not just the points, but another just exceptional showing from Neil Pionk. Played a little bit on his left side after Beaulieu left the game. I think he looked comfortable all over the ice. He's really embraced. We saw what he did against Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. And again, we saw that compete level at an incredibly high level again today. Another big shot on the Andrew Kopp tip from the point. I mean, so the first power play unit on the first power play didn't generate much at all. Second unit had a little bit of momentum generated. The second power play that the Jets had in the game, the first unit did generate some prime quality opportunities, and then just before the penalty expires, you get a big goal from that second unit. We talked about it a lot this year. The Jets do have some options on that second unit that they could use on the first unit, but right now that second unit has been able to really push the top unit and contribute as well. Sometimes they're setting the stage for the second unit, tiring the opponent, and other times the second unit's actually picked up the top unit, and that's another sign of a good hockey team. So for me, again, such an important game for Neil Pionk. And again, that read that he made on the game-winning goal, his ability to step up in the neutral zone and intercept that pass. Again, there were 3 incredible plays that happened in succession. Great read and anticipation by Pionk. Impressive saucer pass on the backhand by Andrew Kopp at just the perfect time to get the defenseman to commit to him, and then just an absolutely great burst of speed. Dare I say, Wheeler-esque drive to the net by Mason Appleton, something that we saw a lot from Blake Wheeler for a long, long time. That ability to take a defenseman wide and get to the far post, just, again, such an impressive thing. And then Hellebuck's ability to just slam the door. Laser-like focus, and the fact that I love that he admits the fact that it gives him a little bit extra incentive, and the way that Paul Maurice sort of capped the Zoom session after I asked him about what it means to know what you're going to get from your goaltender, and no better example that Paul Maurice has had a lot of mediocre goaltending throughout the course of his coaching career. And, it hasn't taken much for him to acknowledge that he has an elite goalie now. And that elite goalie stepped up big against one of the best teams in the National Hockey League here tonight.
All right, that's it for us, everybody. Keep an eye out, because I think we're going to be popping up and doing these lives more often. We've got the capability to do it. We might as well get at it. If you haven't followed us on YouTube yet, you will have found us on either of our Twitter pages. If you go there, we've each tweeted the link to this, and there's a link there that takes you to our YouTube page. Go there, click on that, subscribe. We've got a lot of good content coming there. Really appreciate you all joining us. Really appreciate your questions and your comments. It means a ton to us that you took the time to join us. We hope to see you in the future. Have a great night, everybody.